Alright, so today we're going to review Thomas the Tank Engine, and this is a replica of the Gauge 1 model that they used in the show Thomas and Friends before they switched to CGI, and these are produced by the Japanese company CoolProps. Now the first impression I have of this is just how big this is. It's like the size of my hand, and it makes HO scale seem tiny in comparison. But yeah, this model looks really great in person. I really like how the face turned out. It actually looks like Thomas. A lot of companies have tried making Thomas the Tank Engine models, but usually their faces are kind of weird. So this is the first time they made a model that's faithful and accurate to the original. You can even see the eyeballs in the socket, which we'll look at later. So apparently my Thomas is number 161, so they made at least 161 of these. But anyways, let's get started here in the front. So of course in the middle we have his face, which looks pretty nice. I have seen some other videos where the face looks pretty dark, but with proper lighting I think the colors look accurate to the show. And he has a smile on his face. Now if you look at it really close, there is a very slight imperfection in this eyeball, but from far away you can't really tell. Now you can actually open up Thomas and just pull out his face so it looks like this. And then in the back there is this knob to control his eyes, so you can actually animate his eyes moving around. It really comes to life. Now initially I thought it was a knob you twist around, but turns out it's more like a joystick, which is inverted, so you have to push it the opposite way where you want him to look. This is honestly one of the coolest features of this model. Now if his pupils are a little bit off, you can actually remove his face mask. And now you can see his eyeballs, and you can adjust it to your liking by twisting it. And once you're satisfied with it, you can just put his face back on. Just like that. So here's how the inside of Thomas looks like. You can see his circuit board, and at the bottom there are some openings on the sides. And in the front there is a magnet and a switch to activate the lights. Like the lamp in the front, we'll see that later. So once you got his face, just put it back, and it snaps in like that. There also is this notch at the bottom, which fits around the switch. So if you try to put him upside down, it's not going to fit all the way, and it's pretty cursed. And if you try to put him sideways, it looks like this, which does look pretty funny, but I was just curious what that would look like. So there really is only one way to fit the face in. But if you don't like this face, it does come with 2 additional face masks, which you can use instead of this one. So here is his tired face, or exhausted. He's out of breath with these pink painted cheeks. So this is another option you can use. Maybe he's been pulling a heavy train or just hit a brick wall. Thomas was exhausted. And then here is the smiling Thomas with his teeth showing, which I think looks nice, but I think the original Thomas smiling face is much better than this one. Something about this face, it just doesn't look like Thomas to me. The Thomas I know looks like this and this, not this. And I'm not the only one who thinks this way, because on Reddit there was a post talking about it. But what do you guys think? Does this face look like Thomas to you, or maybe it's another character? But for me, I'm just gonna stick with this face, which is my favorite and looks best out of the 3. Alright, so in the front we have some lamp irons with an actual headlamp in the corner painted white. Then we have some black buffers which are not spring loaded, and it also has this chain coupler in the middle which you can actually detach. And you can pull it out like this and it swings freely. And you can use this to pull another rolling stock. And you can actually take the whole thing off, so it looks like this, and you can even fold up the middle part. And this is how it looks like when it's stowed, and it's interesting that it's actually 2 hooks, which I've never seen that before. And that's how you can hook it together. And then we have the vacuum brake pipe, which is common on British steam locomotives, though nowadays air brakes have replaced these. And it does have this nice accordion texture to it, although this thing is actually floating and it doesn't touch the baseboard. And also another interesting thing about Thomas is that if you look in the front, you can see the black part, which is his neck. It's actually quite skinny, and he has these blue parts on the sides, but they're in the shadow, so it kind of looks like it's dark. Then we'll take a look at the side, which on top we have a splasher, which is sort of like a wheel well. There also is this empty gap in between, which is painted black inside. We also have the iconic number 1 painted on the side, because Thomas is number 1, and all this printing, it looks pretty good. And also on the side we have the running board, which actually sticks out quite a bit, and it goes all the way to the back where it makes a ledge. Alright, then at the bottom we have the 3 driving wheels, which out of the box is actually quite stiff, so it doesn't roll that well, so you may have to break it in a bit. And over the tracks, it just slides over the rails rather than rolling. Even if you push it down, it just spins the wheels a little bit, but still looks pretty nice with this counterweight, which are common on steam locomotives, and it's the balance with the valve gear or side rod in this case. And these rods are made of metal, but there is this dark area here in the middle, kind of uneven color, and I tried to wash it off, but apparently it's stained in the actual metal. I think they probably should have painted this because in the show it's pretty even. And also if you look at it from the bottom, you can see it's actually two separate pieces, so they kind of interlock with each other, so when you rotate one wheel it turns the others. And that's actually how the real model Thomas works. You might remember that episode where he broke his side rod. You can see it's two separate parts. Then in the back we have the cab section, which there are some steps at the bottom to climb up. And you can see just how close it gets to the pin, just barely, but it doesn't touch it. Then we have an indent for a sidewall. Then inside we have the circular black thing, which is actually accurate to the show. Now if you take a look at the top view, you can see we have the smokestack at the front, and on the sides we have the water fill hatches, which these boxes on the sides are actually water tanks. And that's why Thomas is called Thomas the Tank Engine. And he has an elongated side tank, just like on his basis the E2 class. Then in the center we have the steam dome, which is molded in nicely. It's pretty smooth. Then on top we have some red pinstriping. You can see it stops right before the dome. And if you look closely, you can see this is where they put two different strokes. Just on this stripe, you can't see a clear line, but it's actually the same for all of them. Then next up, we have Thomas's whistle, which is painted in this nice metal brass color. And it looks to be a separately applied piece. And I didn't notice this before, but apparently there is a raised section underneath. Then from the front view, you can see the windows, a little bit of the black showing at the bottom. And they're semi-transparent, so it's a little opaque with a yellow outline. And you can also see the seam line on the side, which I have heard a lot of people bring this up in every video, but honestly it doesn't really bother me that much. There also is another seam line here, so this is probably how they fit it all together. Also the frames of the windows actually pop out a little bit. You can see from the side it is extruded. And on the side they painted the outlines yellow. And then on top we have this black roof. Yeah, nothing really crazy there. Then here's the back view, which looks pretty nice. At the top you can see it does make a swooping curve upwards. And over here we have the coal bunker. And it's made of this plastic material. On camera it actually doesn't look that bad, but in real life it does look a bit toy-like, being super glossy and plasticky. Then on the sides we have these tiny vents, which I actually don't know why Thomas even has this. Wouldn't the coal just fall through the holes? Also the rear windows have bars in it, and they are see-through. And then in the back we have his tail lamp, which you can turn on. Later I'll show you guys. And then at the bottom we have the vacuum brake, which again is floating. Then we have the rear buffers, and the chain coupler works just like the front. And then here is the other side of Thomas. It's pretty much the same thing. So that's it for the top. Now let's go check out the underside, which is mostly this giant box at the bottom, which you can see even from the front view, it is very boxy. It also says 2022 Ghislaine Thomas Limited, and there are these hexagon screw holes for the box. And in the front we have this latch, which we'll take off in a bit. And in the back there is this random circle thing and another latch. Alright, so this is what's underneath the shell, the chassis. It's pretty bare bones. Here you can see the gears inside, how they turn when the wheels move. And in the front you can see there is another hole for the front gear. And here's how the back looks like. And you can see the whole frame is quite boxy. Now here's how Thomas looks like without his chassis. And underneath inside the shell you can see the wiring for the lights, which hooks up to the batteries. And for some reason there is an arrow here. Then this wire would lead up to the tail light in the back. And inside are some R44 coin batteries. So apparently this arrow thing is for you to pull it out. And then the batteries should work, which they're made by Mitsubishi. Alright, so once you fill that in, you can go back to the front, pull out its face, and then you can activate the switch for the lamp lights. And it turns on just like this, very cool. And then if you go to the back, the tail lamp turns on as well. So I did add in lube to the gears, including the part in the front, and now it rolls much better. But it's still going to slide on the track because there's no traction. And I did find out that these pieces on the sides is actually for the gears that go in between the wheels. So here's how Thomas would look like with his wheels turning. It looks pretty awesome, although I did put him on a foam board so he has more traction. Also the wheels are pretty squeaky. Alright, so now let's go test out the lamps. So here's how it looks like in the dark. Definitely has a nice effect. And here's how the front looks like in the dark. and it kind of brings him more to life. So I think it's great they added this feature. You can see there is a bit of yellow glow shining through the bottom though. Now for the actual display that it comes with, because this is a display model, which is probably why they don't care if it just slides around like this. The rails are pretty smooth. It's made of plastic and they painted it black, but you can see it's starting to wear away, which I think is actually better because for real rails they'll be shiny on top. And then for the track bed, it's really nice with these small pebbles for the ballast, which you do have to glue it yourself. It actually comes with quite a lot of extra ballast, so you don't have to worry if you don't have enough. Now since I'm just using Elmer's glue, it can easily come off, but generally it sticks together. And you can see the railroad ties, they have a nice wooden texture, and there's spikes to anchor down the rail to the sleeper, and on the very edge you can see the I-beams. Now one thing you gotta be aware of when you're gluing down the rocks, make sure they don't go in the way of the wheel flanges, because there is some wiggle room around the wheels. And then on the bottom we have a nameplate, it says Thomas, a nice little plaque, and behind it we have this dark brown box, and it's actually made of real wood, but the texture is really rough. It just feels like sandpaper. I feel like they should have sanded it down so it's smoother. If you ever felt the top of a tree stump, that's kind of what it feels like. But a cool thing about this is that if you remove Thomas and the top cover, you can use it as a storage box, where you can store the extra face masks or the special card that they give you. So it does have a purpose. So here's a size comparison between HO scale and gauge 1, which is around 1:32 scale. It's also known as 1 gauge. It's an older model railroad standard, most popular in the early 1900s, but still kinda exists. And Thomas is actually built from parts of German Markland models, and the model series was filmed with a gauge 1 layout. And here I just want to show you some footage of a gauge 1 layout. This is in the Hara Railway Museum in Japan, and since it's 1 gauge, they can actually run Thomas props from the show, but unfortunately when I got there I didn't get to see them because apparently they're only available for certain time periods. So I brought in my scale trains BNSF-9, and you can really see the scale difference, which 1 gauge is around 2.7 times bigger than HO scale. It really makes HO scale seem like a little toy in comparison, like when I made that N scale video. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the CoolProps Thomas. It is definitely the most accurate model of Thomas the Tank Engine ever made. It has great color and proportions, it comes with the lamps that light up, and you can switch out the faces, animate the eyes, turn the wheels. I've always wanted to get a Thomas, but many companies have trouble, especially making Thomas's face. It always looks kind of weird, so I was quite happy when someone decided to create a real full-scale replica, which actually looks great. I grew up watching a lot of Thomas and Friends. It was really nostalgic to me, especially the model series, and maybe that's why I like trains. So if you are a Thomas fan, you probably will enjoy the CoolProps Thomas a lot. It's great for display purposes. Now for the cons, I've actually been waiting a whole year to get this. A few other people gotten it last year, so I did order it where the website said they're in stock, but it turns out it wasn't actually in stock, and probably they had to make a new batch. And some people have been pre-ordering it years ago, and CoolProps just stopped all their social media posts for a year and they didn't reply to emails. So a lot of people were fed up and they wanted a refund since they didn't get it for a long time, and they spent quite a bit of money because CoolProps Thomas is quite expensive. I myself wasn't even sure if it will actually come until I got an email one day. It's shipping and it finally arrived after 16 days. So I'm glad it turned out to be legit, but I do feel bad for the ones who pre-ordered it years ago and they just canceled it right when they're finally arriving this year. Another con is that it's just for display. You can't really roll it on the tracks it comes with, but if you wanted to, there is plenty of room inside to add a motor. And I noticed in other videos no one actually puts the ballast on the tracks, but it turns out it's not that complicated. Literally just Elmer's glue and just pour rocks on it. I do wish though they would sand the box because it does feel really rough, leaves a little trail on my white desk, and maybe they could have done a better job on the teeth smiling face, which by the way, you can actually get some extra faces in the Annie and Clarabelle set. But in the end, I definitely think the CoolProps Thomas is worth it because you can't really get this anywhere else off the shelf. You would have to custom make it yourself, which some people do have some pretty cool Thomas builds, but it will take a lot of time, effort, and materials. But yeah, that's my review of the CoolProps Thomas. I hope you guys enjoy the video. If you do, hit the like button. You can leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.